Good morning. This is Anthony Kelly here from Dublin, talking to the Irish writer Sam Blake, and she's a marvelous novelist. She's written crime thrillers, standalone thrillers, crime trilogy featuring an amazing detective and young adult prize-winning books. So welcome, Sam. And I know you're originally from England, but I think I've adopted you as an Irish writer because you write so beautifully about Dublin. And so welcome. And how are you this morning?
I'm great, thank you. Yeah, no, originally I'm from St Albans in Hertfordshire, just near to London, but I have been living in Ireland now much longer than I ever lived in the UK. So I think I'm naturalised, as they say, definitely part of the fabric of the place, I hope.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've been reading one of your books, Remember My Name, and I'm from Dublin myself. And oh my God, I was like I love reading between the lines and seeing what's going on. And but what I was really impressed about was like all of a sudden the character is in a cafe, like bestseller cafe, where I go for coffee.
Yeah,
And
on
and
Dawson
it's
Street.
like
Yeah.
normally I'm reading like books, Scandinor novels, and with strange names and Scandinavian, and I'm trying to visualize what Helsinki looks like. And all of a sudden I'm in Grand Canal Dock and in Dublin, and I'm in Bestseller Cafe where I have coffee, and I sometimes sketch people, like I do like little cafe sketches, and your character's there in the novel sitting in the same bookshop, and I'm like, oh my God. And then you're in Grand Canal Dock and you talk about the sculptures, these award-winning sculptures. I'm like, oh my God, I walk past there regularly. So it was lovely to feel like you're painting my city. And then you were talking about the Sugarloaf and driving past Sugarloaf, and so it was lovely to see Dublin brought to life, so well. And but little hints and touches, not overly detailed, and but also you have all these warm characters, and I was fascinated by your by the characters in this thriller, in this book in particular. And so I mean, and again, thank you so much for coming today and having I know you're very busy, and but I just got really into your book, and
Oh, I'm delighted you read it. It's I really love location. I think location is like a character in all my books. Yeah, so that one's set in Dublin City, and then in Wicklow and Wexford. And yeah, I really very much try and create the location so that if you haven't been to Dublin or you've never been to, Wexford town is a town just south of Dublin City on the coast, so it's got beautiful beaches, and obviously you go past the mountains, the Dublin Mountains on the way down. So I want to create an atmosphere that if you've never been to Ireland at all, that you can actually see Ireland, and feel it, and really get a sense of place, because I think that's really, really important in a novel. And it's something that I enjoy reading in books. So I try and contrast locations between books. So one book might be a city book, and then the next book might be a country book. And I make a conscious decision about flipping between them so that we get a real different set of locations. But yeah, they're a whole different parts of Ireland, and some of them are make up. Most of them I like to keep places real, so that if you're reading that, yes, exactly that you go, "Oh, actually, God, I recognize this place and I've been there," and you get that sense of familiarity. But some locations then I make up completely. It just depends on the book. But the most important thing for me, I suppose, is to leave a bit of room for the reader, so the reader can then bring their own imagination to the story as well. And everybody's sat in a busy cafe, so the idea is to get you a sense of what that busy cafe is like, but also to be able to leave room so that you can use your own imagination as a reader as well.
fantastic. I know I get exactly what you're saying. Let the reader fill in the blanks like a jigsaw puzzle, and I know you like puzzles. And I was also fascinated by the kind of investigator character. She's like a security specialist, Bryony O'Brien. She was painted very well. Her haircut, her pink hair, her she describes how often it's like she needs a haircut. She's got the double fades at the back. She's like programming. She has all these viruses and worms. So it's kind of a bit like the girl in the dragon tattoo. You have this kind of like Irish kind of traditional society where everyone's into sport and, the local pub. Next minute you have this kind of hacker type who's living down the countryside, by the beach, probably not far from where they filmed I know in Wexford they filmed the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, that like battle scene by the beach, just on the shores of Curracloe Beach in Wexford. So she probably lives not far from there.
Yeah.
And then she's like driving to Dublin, and she's like investigating with her phone, and like she's trying wigs on. It was really interesting because it's whatever I found it, she was very lifelike. She was very colorful, and at the same time, you know, not overly done. You don't find out too much information, but she kind of carries the story along.
Yeah, that's it. Well, that's the idea, is that every character leaves a little bit of room for the reader again, so that, because we all know people like that, or we've seen people on the TV or whatever, and we want to be able to put our own take on that, our own imaginations come into play as well. But yeah, no, I love Brioni. She's got yeah, she's young, she's very savvy, she's very techie, and yeah, she has that double pink undercut. She actually I really love writing strong female characters. So there's a lot of very strong female characters in my book who have, obviously they have issues and different things go on, but they fundamentally are quite solid people. And I actually was on the tube in London and thinking about the book and thinking about the story and where I was going to take it. And I had an idea about that book starts with a telephone call. A wife overhears her husband on the telephone. He doesn't hang it up properly and he's talking to another woman. And that's how that book really kicks off. And so I'd had that idea and I needed some characters to come into play. And I actually wrote Brioni in a book called High Pressure when she was a bit younger. And I really liked her. I didn't really feel her story was over. So I thought she'd be great for this one because I wanted to use the computer and the hacking side. Because I think I'm really interested in technology and how people use it today.
Mm.
But yeah, no, I was on the tube thinking about the story, thinking about the book. And a girl got on the tube who had bright pink hair, undercut, leather jacket. Just thought that's Brioni. Like, it's brilliant. This is literally who it is. And it happens a lot. I think we gather as authors, whenever I'm thinking about a book, I have my antennae twitching and I'm looking for ideas and talking to different people and just listening generally to conversations and paying attention to my surroundings. So, if I was sitting in the bestseller cafe like you, I'd be sitting there looking at all the different people. And that's, I suppose, all part of it. And it becomes an amalgam then. Every book, every character becomes an amalgam of what you see. But yeah, literally the genesis for Brioni started with a girl who literally got on the tube in front of me and sat down and was just literally like she just walked into the story. So it was great.
Wow, that's so exciting. I'm always like looking around and like analyzing, and like sometimes I overhear conversations. I'm like, oh my god, I wonder what you're talking about. And another character in the book that I was fascinated by was, and I think the Mexican audience would probably be very interested, was this kind of Latin American character, Nina.
Mm, Nina.
And she's instrumental in the story. And of course Dublin now, we have a lot of people from Latin America, from Mexico, Venezuela, from Brazil, and I really like that as well. The way you kind of Dublin is a very traditional Georgian kind of very old fashioned environment, and I like the way the characters live, like along the sea and in Dalkey. So you really combine this kind of modern Dublin and Ireland, which is like a very international, with like people from Mexico, from Venezuela, tech companies, and then you have this old kind of older money by the sea. So you've done an amazing job of just kind of creating this modern melange
Mm.
of Dublin, which kind of reflects the city really, really well. And I think Nina is a wonderful anti-hero as well, like or kind of villainess who kind of is seductive, beautiful, sexy, and dangerous as well. So it's like, wow, she's
Very
like
smart.
very
Yeah,
smart,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And I love Nina, and we'll have to see what happens to Nina and if she comes up again, or we'll wait and see. But yeah, no, again, I like writing characters like that that've got a bit of depth, and every character has a backstory. Everybody has reasons to be in a place that they're in, and I think that's really really important, so that the characters are three-dimensional and they feel really real to people. So when I'm researching a character, when I'm trying to get to grips with who they are, I really get into their backstory and find out, where they went to school and what they studied and all that, even if they're only minor characters, just to get a real sense of who they might be. Because I think that even if I don't tell you, the reader, or that doesn't come into the story, it comes into the DNA of the character, and I think it comes through on the page. So it's really important, yeah, to get a sense of who that might be. And Nina's a brilliant character. She's really feisty, and yeah, she's got her own agenda, let's just say.
Yeah, I really like the scene where she meets Lawrence and they're kind of, she's got all this data. I won't reveal too much about the plot, but she's like haggling and bargaining, and she's like, and then they're being watched, of course, by Bryony, and like
Mm,
who's hacked his phone using this kind of worm, and she's like, oh, Lawrence, and she's kind of analyzing their kind of scene, which is like a scene within a scene, which is very clever. And it's funny because Brian is analyzing it, like he's saying, this guy Lawrence, he's pretty dumb, like, and it's kind of, I thought it was quite funny. There's a bit of humor in there, and and I like the kind of subtext as well of, like, all the men, being distrustful, untrustworthy, and even this, this guy who has all these friends, and he's with his, the old boys network, like he's prepared to
mm.
kind of, get seedy information on his friends to twist their arms. So it's kind of, you paint the characters very well. Could this be, would you envision, if you got a movie offer, could this be in the pipeline? Would you like to see it made into like a movie or like a series? Would that be something that excites you?
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, all the books, taking books into film can be quite tricky because of locations and all those different types of things. But no, absolutely. And we're always, I have a screen agent, so they're always talking to people. And some of the books have been optioned, some of them are under conversation, in discussion at the moment. So yeah, no, I'd love to see that happen. We'll have to wait and see what happens. There's a lot of it's a funny world, the screen world, because you can get something optioned, and what happens is people, they option lots of different things, but whether they get made is an entirely
Yes.
different thing, because there's a lot of funding issues that have to get involved. But no, three or four of my friends at the moment have had stuff that's been made or is in the process of being made. So that's very exciting. There's some great stuff coming forward for Netflix, and I think on Amazon as well. Yeah, so look out for some Irish crime on your televisions very soon.
Oh my God. Well, that's something that our readers in Mexico are, fascinated by, like the Irish literary scene, right? And it seems like, you've set up as well, Writers Inc., this really exciting crime writing festival. That's where we met. I've gone to a couple of events over the years, and would you like to talk? And you set it up like this is your brainchild. This is amazing. Like, again, you're so talented. You have like a readers groups. You have you've got the Writers Inc. festival. You've got the Inkwell group as well.
Yeah, so
So
yeah, I suppose it all came from Inkwell. Started off when I was trying to learn to write. I really wanted to learn how to write better, and so I set up. I organised some writers' workshops, which really I did entirely for myself, and just because I knew wanted to hear from best-selling authors, and I wanted to have workshops that were like one-day workshops on a Saturday for various reasons, and they became really successful. Yeah, so out of that grew something called writing.ie, which is a huge website. It's Europe's biggest writing resources website. And that's won lots of awards too. It's just an enormous website. So if anybody is writing and they're interested and they need to find resources on how to do it better, and how to, I'm really interested in people's stories and how they got published. So when I was a debut author, or when I was trying to get published, I was really interested in what made the difference between somebody like me who was still working and aspiring, and somebody who'd actually been published. And so there's a lot of stories about from first time writers on there as well. So that's writing.ie. Yeah, Writers Inc. is actually the group, the writers group I run. So I've got about a writers group, an international writers group with about 100 people in it, that's run through Facebook. And that's really exciting. I love doing that. I've got people in Mauritius, I've got people in Nova Scotia, all over the world, and a lot, obviously good few in Ireland, lots in Europe. And we critique work every week. We do prompts. It's very motivational. I work with a mindset coach on it. So it's very much about, because I think writing is tough because you do it on your own. And when you flip from the creative side to getting published, it becomes much more sort of business based. And so it's understanding how the business side of it works is very important. And then you have to do all the PR. So then you have to turn from this person who's been sitting in your bedroom writing this one story on your own, and it's all come out of your head, into this sort of semi-marketing business person. And then you have to get on TV or radio or whatever, and you turn into this person to talk about your book. And so there's quite a lot in that process, and not everybody is made for all of those things. So one thing about the Writers Inc. group is that we do coach people and help them with all of those things. So that's what we do. And then yeah, Murder One is the festival, and I'm a crime writer, and I really love crime writing. And there are some really great festivals in the UK, big crime festivals, but there wasn't anything in Ireland that was specifically crime focused. And crime is one of the biggest selling genres. And I just really felt that we've got some fantastic crime writers in this country, that there should be an opportunity for them to shine as well. So yeah, so I set up Murder One. We ran it in Dublin to start with, and now we've just moved out to Dunleary to the Lexicon Library. But we've had some great authors, and we're very flexible because obviously I run it myself, so I'm not really tied into so many difficult things that you can be if you know, I can make my own decisions. So we've
Yeah.
had whenever an author comes past, if there's a good author coming past, you know, some of the big Americans, we've had Jeffrey Deaver and Michael Connolly and Karen Slaughter, and Jane Harper came from Australia. So if there's people coming through, then I can run events around them too. So it's great. But yeah, the main weekend is in October every year, and actually it's quite a lot of it on YouTube. So if anybody's watching in Mexico and they want to have a look, if they look up Murder One on YouTube, in 2022 we live streamed the whole festival, so there's all the interviews are on there, and they're really, really worth watching. There's a fantastic one with Mick Herron talking about slow horses, for anybody who's seen Slow Horses on Netflix, and it's great. So
Oh, fantastic. I'm just so awed by how you managed to do all of these things. You must be like a work, not like a workaholic, but you must be so but I can see as well that you're very inspired and you love what you do. And
yeah,
as I say, that if you do something you love, you never work a day in your life.
yeah, well,
Uh,
that's it. Yeah, it's all interconnected, and I do really enjoy it. I do work, anybody who works for themselves knows that they end up working completely different hours from anybody who works 9 to 5. So yeah, I work quite a lot of days of the week extra, and evenings, and obviously when you're doing events and stuff, then you're working evenings as well. But I love it all, so it's fine. Like you say, it's not really work.
oh. And I don't want to keep you too long. I know you're so busy. Would you have any like advice for a young person, say in Mexico or even in Ireland, or if, who's loves books, who wants to had dreams about at some point of being a writer or working in writing? Would you have any advice for that young um, Nina out there?
Yeah. Well, I think the most important thing is to read in your genre, so that you get a sense of what other people are writing. You can read absolutely as a reader rather than analysing the text. Just keep reading, read, because subconsciously you're taking on board all the things, the techniques those writers are using. And then absolutely study, if you can, read about fiction writing technique, because they don't teach you fiction writing technique in school. And there are a few things that you need to learn in order to write well, and to move from, something, a hobby, into something that's more commercial. But just keep writing was the best advice I was ever given, because every word you write makes you a better writer. And it might not be the first book that you write that gets published, because we all have to cut our teeth. So Little Bones, which was my first novel, my debut novel, was a huge bestseller, but it was my fifth book. So I had written literally 100,000 by four, actually probably more than that, because there are lots of partials and other bits and pieces out there. Probably 500,000 words before I started that novel. And Malcolm Gladwell talks about reaching a tipping point. He did a whole load of research for one of his books, and he talks about how this sort of 10,000 hours, how people who've been successful in life do 10,000 hours at whatever it is. So whether it's the Beatles or whether you're a star basketball player, you need to be looking at that type of level of practice before you reach the tipping point when things start to happen. And I'm a firm believer in that. And I think it's the same with writing. So you need to serve your apprenticeship. Don't I think one of the things we think is that when we start writing, we get disappointed because what's in our head isn't materializing on the page in the way that we expect it to. But don't be put off. The first draft is a vomit draft. It's for nobody else except you. It will be a mess. It will be terrible. Expect it to be. And the whole point is that once the words are on the page, then you can start redrafting them, rewriting them, polishing them, playing with them, moving things around. You can't do that with words that are in your head. So it's really important to get the words on the page right to the end of the first draft. And it doesn't matter what sort of mess it is, because that's just your first draft. Some of my early books, so Little Bones, probably had 20 or 30 drafts before it went out to anybody.
Wow.
It's hard work. There's a lot in it. It's going to take you more than a year to write it. But I write quite quickly now, because that's the way my mind works. But you want to imagine it's going to take you a year to write a book. So it's not something that's going to happen overnight. It really is something that you need to spend time at and enjoy, and really study in the sense of like reading other people's books, and
Mm.
um yeah, and the thing, most important thing as well, I think, is creativity is very personal, and everybody's creativity is personal. So there are lots of things out there that say you must do this and you must do that and you must write this way. Just take the bits that work for you, the bits that chime with you. Don't worry about, if somebody says slavishly, well, you have to write chapters of this length. You don't have to do that, because that's what works for them, but it might not work for you. You might be
Yeah.
writing a completely different type of book. So creativity is personal, and it's really a case of reading and listening to authors, listening to author interviews, getting as many tips as you can, and sort of creating your own process, if you like. And you'll do that while you're writing. So it's, yeah, just keep writing. Best advice I was ever given.
Sure. Well, just one last question about your first book that was so successful. And my question is about the opening of the book, because I'm very interested in opening pages or opening chapters. And I remember reading it, and the this, and it's about this dress, and inside the dress are the character finds these little bones. And I mean, wow, like this is like out there, like it's like really, for me, it's like it's almost like a surrealist painting, like a dress, like I can imagine it like a Salvador Dali painting. It's it's quite beautiful in a sense, and macabre. So how
Yeah.
did this come from a dream, or did this come from like a core? Could you elaborate on that a little bit, maybe how you
Yeah.
got this amazing almost
Idea.
fantasy piece?
Yeah, well, Stephen King talks about great story coming from two unrelated ideas, and that it's the collision of those ideas that gives you great story. And about, oh, it was a long time ago now, so probably 10 years before I started writing it, I'd heard or watched an RT documentary about an Irish girl who had gone to Manchester. I've obviously got a lot more detail about this now because I researched the case, but essentially she went to Manchester. She was pregnant. She went to Manchester to work in Manchester, sort of running away from home because she wasn't married. And she had the baby in a room that she shared with another girl at night on her own. And the baby died, and she wrapped up the baby in a dress and she put it in her suitcase and hid it under her bed, and then came back to Ireland to confess to her priest, leaving the baby behind. And she was one of the last people to be convicted of infanticide in the UK. And this idea just really stuck with me.
Oh,
And the
wow.
idea of, the fact that she managed to give birth and didn't wake the other girl up, and just the whole situation was just ghastly. So it was just really interesting. And I think as a writer, I get light bulb moments where a light bulb literally lights in my head. And I'm just, oh, that's really interesting. So this stayed with me. And then, but literally 10 years later, I was driving back from the airport. I'd been running an event in the airport, a writers event, and it used to be, before they've built a motorway now from the airport to where I live now, called the M50. But anyway, that didn't used to be there, and so it was a very, very long road. It took an hour and a half to get from here to the airport, and there were like 35 sets of traffic lights. And I put the radio on, and as I was driving through, obviously wending my way, a documentary came onto RT Radio about a playwright called Gabriel Fitzmaurice, whose play The Country Dressmaker had saved the Abbey Theatre. So the Abbey Theatre was going through a lot of troubles. He wrote this amazing play. It literally saved the fortunes of the theatre. But he, in fact, died in Capel Street, which is one of the roads in Dublin, destitute. And he left all his plays and all his unpublished plays and everything in a suitcase on his bed. And so it was the suitcases on the bed that really connected for me in
Okay.
these two ideas. And by the time I got home, his story was about the country dressmaker. She had gone off pregnant to Manchester. The one thing that she would have wanted more than anything else in the world was a wedding dress, and that's what the country dressmaker would have made. And so by the time I got back, I was thinking about, I had the wedding dress in my head, and I had the bones of the baby sort of hidden in a suitcase. They were hidden in the hem of the wedding dress. And so that's what that opening scene is. Kat Connolly, who's the detective, it's called to a routine break-in, and when she's investigating the break-in, as a bedroom and things are tossed around, she discovers this wedding dress, and it's been snagged on a nail in the wardrobe, and she sees in the hem these bones, and that's how the story starts. And when I started writing it, I didn't know how the bones had got there or what they were doing there, and I literally had to find the story as I wrote. And it was when I was writing as a scene of an interview where the truth behind the bones is revealed. And it wasn't until I actually was writing that interview that I actually knew what had happened and how it had all come together. So yeah, so writing is a bit of a mysterious process, but yeah, it was those two completely unrelated ideas connected by a suitcase. And in the story, later on in the story, we discover there is a suitcase which is significant to the story, that turns up, let's say. So yeah,
Wow.
that's how that idea came about.
I can just visualize you just, driving from the airport and the story writing itself in your head and your subconscious, like knitting it, stitching it,
Yeah.
weaving it as you're driving with the lights flashing past you. It's so exciting. And Cat Conley as well, a lovely name. It like almost like a CC, Conley, like Bryony O'Brien. Lovely use of alliteration, and I suppose when I was like I wouldn't go. I mean, I wouldn't go read like what York is. It's the imagery. You got alliteration, imagery. It's beautiful writing, and you don't. Some writers use like big long words. I mean, your work is so accessible. It's really nice and it flows, and it's very descriptive, lovely locations. Um, Thank you so much for your time,
Not
and
at all, delighted.
you should probably plug your latest book or your next book, and I hope everybody in Mexico picks up one of your novels and in your local library, in their local library, or through.
Yeah, they can
um,
definitely get them in the library or on audio. Actually, I've just got notification yesterday that this book, actually, this is Three of the Birds. This is the one that's out at the moment.
oh wow,
I'm in the top 200 authors on Spotify for audiobooks. So you can definitely, they should be able to get the audiobooks. But the one that's coming out in January is called The Killing Sense, and that's a complete change. That's set in Paris. So we go from Ireland in this one, County Mayo in Ireland in that one, to Paris in this one. So it's yeah, definitely contrasting locations.
wow. Well, Sam, thank you so much for your time. You're wonderful, and I'm so excited now. I feel like infused with energy to create and write. And I hope to see your name up there in the bestsellers lists, and up there hopefully soon, and Amazon and Netflix and all that stuff. Again, thank you. Muchas gracias para tu tiempo, and muy buenos dias, and have a wonderful Christmas. And thank you so much for your time. You're amazing, absolutely amazing. And just thank you again for your time, because I know you're so busy.
That's great. Thank you very much indeed.
Great. Thank you so much.